A peaceful flight takes a shocking turn when a police officer wrongfully detains a black woman, unaware she's a powerful civil rights lawyer. What happens next exposes his prejudice and sparks a movement. Follow this powerful story and let us know where you're watching from. It started like any other morning at the bustling Atlanta airport. Passengers were boarding Flight 267, bound for Chicago. Among them was a young black woman named Maya Brooks, dressed in a simple but professional outfit, a black blazer over a white blouse. She carried a leather tote bag, its contents neatly organized. Maya was calm, her earbuds in as she listened to soft music while waiting for the plane to take off. A few rows back, Officer Daniel Hayes, an off-duty police officer in plain clothes, watched her closely. He had boarded the same flight, heading to a training seminar. To Daniel, Maya seemed out of place. She had an air of confidence that made him uncomfortable, though he couldn't explain why. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Maya stood up briefly to retrieve a file from her bag in the overhead compartment. Daniel's eyes narrowed. He noticed her file folder, labeled in bold letters, and immediately assumed it was suspicious. He leaned toward the passenger next to him and muttered, "She's acting strange." The flight attendants were finishing their safety demonstration when Daniel decided he couldn't wait any longer. He stood, walked up the aisle, and stopped at Maya's seat. "Ma'am, I need to see some identification," he said, his voice low but firm. Maya looked up, startled but composed. She took out her earbuds and asked, "Is there a problem?" "I'm asking the questions," Daniel replied. "ID, please." Passengers nearby began to murmur, their eyes darting between Maya and Daniel. Maya calmly handed over her driver's license. Daniel studied it for a moment, then handed it back, unsatisfied. "What's in the folder?" he demanded, pointing to her lap. Maya frowned. "It's personal." "Why are you asking?" Daniel's tone grew sharper. "I'm an officer of the law, and I'm asking you to cooperate." By now, the murmurs in the cabin had grown louder. A flight attendant approached, her expression concerned. "Sir, is there an issue here?" Daniel flashed his badge. "This is official business. Please step back." The flight attendant hesitated but complied, sensing the tension. Maya, however, didn't back down. She placed the folder on her lap and said firmly, "This is a business file. There's nothing illegal here." Daniel wasn't convinced. "Stand up," he ordered. Maya sighed, her patience wearing thin, but she complied. She stood tall, her posture confident. Daniel grabbed the folder and flipped it open, his eyes scanning the pages. What he found wasn't what he expected: charts, contracts, and legal documents. "What is this?" he asked, baffled. Maya crossed her arms. "That's my work. I'm an executive at one of the top consulting firms in the country." "Is there a problem, officer?" Daniel's face reddened, but he wasn't ready to back down. "You're coming with me." "Step off the plane." Maya raised an eyebrow. "On what grounds?" "Suspicious behavior," Daniel snapped, grabbing her arm. The cabin erupted in protests. Passengers pulled out their phones, recording the scene. "This is ridiculous," someone shouted. Maya didn't resist. She allowed Daniel to lead her toward the front of the plane, her head held high. Before stepping off, she turned to the passengers and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Remember this moment." The plane was silent as the door closed behind her. Once inside the terminal, Daniel called for backup, still convinced he was in the right. Maya, however, remained calm. She stood in the middle of the terminal, her arms crossed, waiting for him to explain himself. That's when she spoke the one sentence that would change everything. As Daniel stood in the terminal, fumbling with his phone to call for backup, Maya's calm voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Officer, do you know who I am?" she asked, her tone sharp but composed. Daniel glanced up, his frustration mounting. "I don't care who you are. Suspicious behavior is enough for me to act." Maya let out a quiet laugh, shaking her head. "You should care. I'm Maya Brooks, Chief Legal Counsel for the National Civil Rights Alliance. I specialize in cases against officers like you." Daniel froze, the words hitting him like a freight train. His grip on his phone tightened as he processed what she'd just said. He'd heard her name before, on the news, in legal circles. She was the woman who had taken down entire departments for misconduct, someone who didn't just win cases but exposed systemic failures in the process. Passengers from the flight began trickling into the terminal, their phones still recording. The murmurs grew louder, the tension thicker. Maya turned to face the growing crowd, her voice steady and clear. "This is exactly why I do what I do," she said, addressing the onlookers. "Because people like him abuse their authority, acting on baseless assumptions and profiling. Today it's me. Tomorrow, it could be any one of you." Daniel's face turned pale. He glanced at the crowd, realizing how bad this looked. His authority, his confidence, it was slipping away, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. A senior officer arrived moments later, his face etched with concern. "What's going on here?" he asked, his eyes darting between Daniel and Maya. Maya spoke before Daniel could. "This officer profiled me, harassed me, and illegally detained me without cause. I've done nothing wrong, but he's made it his mission to humiliate me in front of dozens of witnesses." The senior officer's face tightened. He turned to Daniel. "Is this true?" Daniel stammered. "She was acting suspicious. I was just doing my job." "Suspicious how?" the senior officer pressed. Daniel couldn't answer. He looked at Maya, then at the crowd, and finally at the senior officer. I thought." "You thought wrong," Maya interjected, her voice cutting through his excuses. "And now, you're going to face the consequences?" The senior officer sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Ms. Brooks, I deeply apologize for this incident. We'll handle it internally." Maya's eyes narrowed. "Internally? No, this isn't staying behind closed doors. I'm filing a formal complaint. And believe me, this will go public." Daniel's shoulders slumped, the weight of his actions finally sinking in. He opened his mouth to speak, but Maya held up a hand. "Save it. Apologies don't undo the damage you've caused." The senior officer escorted Maya to a quiet area, away from the crowd, and assured her that the department would cooperate fully with any investigation. Maya nodded but didn't let her guard down. She knew words meant nothing without action. As she left the terminal, passengers clapped, their support echoing through the space. Maya didn't smile or wave. She simply walked away, her head held high, knowing the fight was far from over. The fallout was swift. Videos of the incident flooded social media, sparking outrage nationwide. News outlets picked up the story, and within days, Daniel was placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. For Maya, the ordeal became another battle in her ongoing fight for justice. She used the incident to push for mandatory bias training for law enforcement officers and stricter policies on profiling. Her voice grew louder, her platform larger, and her resolve stronger. And for Daniel, it was a harsh lesson, a reminder that power without accountability leads to downfall. He became a cautionary tale, a symbol of what happens when prejudice overrides professionalism. In the end, Maya's one sentence wasn't just a warning. It was a turning point, one that reminded everyone watching that justice doesn't belong to those in power, it belongs to those brave enough to demand it.